Welcome to Module 4, Writing in FSL. This module is intended to support FSL educators in maximizing written production and interaction through high-yield, low-risk strategies. Learners do best when engaging in accountable, productive writing situations that build confidence, develop written proficiency, and understand how French is used to communicate in authentic written situations. With the inclusion of technology in written production and interaction, this module features instructional insights and classroom practices to help educator planning and to support the learner's independent selection and application of strategies to communicate in the target language. When you pause the video to reflect upon prompting questions, consider the ways in which you can provide guidance and support to your FSL educators. The strategies and activities suggested in this module are intended for FSL learners in all grades across all programs. For a more comprehensive explanation of these suggested strategies and activities, refer to the glossary of terms at the end of the document. Today's session goals are as follows. We are exploring and explicitly teaching the writing process so that we can support learners to select effective strategies and problem solve when writing. We are creating authentic opportunities for writing so that we can effectively model varied writing scenarios and integrate contextualized grammar to create authentic writing tasks. We are recognizing our learners as writers so that we can establish culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy in our classrooms to support learner identity and create personal entry points for writing. We are implementing technology platforms and tools so that we can enhance the learner's written production and interaction in FSL. When thinking about writing, the overall expectations will guide what is taught and assessed in the classroom. We'll be sharing strategies to help FSL educators become more familiar with different high-yield teaching strategies to address the overall expectations from the curriculum. The writing process is transferable from a learner's skill in their first language. Throughout the process, educators should be observing learners and supporting them with planning, revising, editing, and polishing their work. Although many skills will transfer from the learner's first language, there are differences in the French language that educators can use as mini lessons, such as by highlighting the many silent letters that are used in the French language. At the beginning of the writing journey, educators will expose learners to linguistic competency, which is knowledge about the vocabulary, grammar, phonemes, and graphemes in French that learners will need to master in order to effectively write in the target language. As learners become more familiar with the language, educators can incorporate sociolinguistic knowledge, such as the changes one might make when speaking to a stranger versus speaking to a friend. The more complex pragmatic competence, that is, knowledge of the characteristics of each form of writing, will encompass details and specifics about the various forms that will be used to introduce learners to the vast array of authentic purposes for writing. A successful writing program requires a knowledgeable, organized educator with excellent classroom management skills. Mostly, learners need lots of time in which to write, a say in what they write about, strategies that allow them to problem solve independently, plan, revise, edit, and helpful response. Routman, 2005. Routman presents the importance of educator pre-planning and careful consideration of the skills needed to write effectively. It is imperative that learners be exposed to many types of writing and that they be encouraged to write for many purposes. They need ample and varied opportunities to problem solve, that is, to plan, revise, and edit their work. It is also important that they incorporate descriptive feedback to engage them in the process of improving their skills as they continue their journey through the writing process. Our learners' needs are always the starting point. Assessment for learning, diagnostic assessment, instructional strategies, and the curriculum components go hand in hand to help guide educators in their day-to-day approach to teaching writing. To gauge where learners are in their writing development, the educator assigns a task, such as responding to an email invitation. The information gathered from this task could include sentence structure, vocabulary knowledge, grammar knowledge, etc. Educators collect the writing samples and use them to establish next steps based upon the now established needs. The FSL curriculum guides educators, and when paired with the Common European Framework of Reference as an instructional tool, educators are equipped with both the curricular expectations and specific objectives for writing. Writing process. The graphic shown on this slide breaks down the writing process for learners in the first language. The process of writing enables learners to clarify their thinking and express their thoughts and feelings. According to the FSL curriculum document, while learners are learning a second language, the planning stage of the writing process is critical. While all pieces of the writing process are important in the second language development, Educators can think about shifting the focus to the part that best suits the needs of the learners in French. With our youngest learners in French immersion, we want to focus on the development of basic writing skills, while with our older learners, we want them to become confident in choosing the correct French vocabulary while selecting and organizing their ideas. Writing tasks should give learners opportunities to organize and develop their thoughts, opinions, and ideas orally in French. This is where educators can engage in conversations with learners to provide insight into how they are producing and refining their writing, and establish a well-balanced writing program that uses a variety of strategies to support learners throughout the writing process. Educators should make it clear to learners the purpose and audience for their writing task. The curriculum document explains that to communicate clearly and effectively, learners need to learn to use standard written forms and French language conventions, but should be given opportunities to produce interactive writing, different types of creative writing, and writing that addresses topics. With our example of responding to an email invitation, learners should understand that they are writing to interact. This provides an opportunity to explore the language structures and vocabulary used in interaction, the sociolinguistic conventions used in responding to another person, as well as key grammar points and context. The CEFR presents a variety of authentic learning situations to meet the diverse needs and sociocultural expectations within the FSL classrooms. Written tasks mimic what a learner at each level might encounter in their daily interactions and provides opportunities to practice. These tasks, in combination with the writing process and the curriculum expectations, provide a rich environment for educators and learners to begin the writing process and facilitates a balance of interaction and production when writing, which will be addressed later in this module. The context in which our learners create written production and interaction are constantly evolving in the FSL classroom. It is therefore essential for educators to recognize strategies for writing that are adaptable for both virtual and in-classroom writing situations. Planning for authentic writing situations, where not all learners and educators have the same access and experience with technology, may require a shift in thinking. Using the CEFR I can statements for performative writing tasks, educators can use the writing process and build in the use of technology based on the learning context. For example, during a pre-writing discussion on J'utilise mes ressources, learners may choose to consult an agreed-upon digital application to create a graphic organizer or translate complex words, which educators can then record in their observations. Pictured here on the left is a sample bank of writing strategies educators may want to share with their learners. Strategies can be used with or without technology. When presenting a strategy for the first time, such as using a graphic organizer, the educator would follow the gradual release of responsibility model, beginning with explicitly teaching and modeling how to use and incorporate it in planning their writing. As learners practice using the tool and are exposed to a variety of organizers for writing support, they may decide to choose their own organizer and decide how it can be used to support their writing. On the right is a sample record of assessment for educators to use while learners are writing. Using our example of responding to an invitation, we may focus our learning on the development of the vocabulary needed to express a response. Educators and learners could co-create resources to support this, such as anchor charts, picture dictionaries, or word walls. As learners produce their written piece, the educator could observe how the resources are being incorporated and will record their observations on the right. How the learner demonstrates their progress would be recorded using the column on the left. Educators will include observation of learners while they are producing their writing, as well as while they are practicing the skills leading up to the task at hand. The Common European Framework of Reference gives us specific I can statements to accompany each level. The CEFR levels work in tandem with the curriculum to provide educators with ways that they can scaffold learning, enabling all learners to clearly see the success criteria and clearly work toward the expectations. This slide provides some examples of activities that could be used to build writing skills. A written production at the B1 level, for example, might involve creating slides and speaker notes to present facts and information from an inquiry project. An interactive written task at the A1 level could be to have learners interact in a chat pod using simple phrases while playing a digital game. It is important to provide a balance of written interaction and production, of spontaneous and more formal writing tasks as learners work through the writing process. At this point, you may wish to pause the video to consider this question. How can you provide opportunities for your learners to interact through writing? The gradual release of responsibility model is integral to enabling learners to gain independence with just the right amount of support as they are developing writing skills. Pearson and Gallagher described the model in this way. The gradual release of responsibility model of instruction suggests that cognitive work should shift slowly and intentionally from educator modeling to joint responsibility between educators and learners to independent practice and application by the learner. If learners are being asked to write a letter to a friend explaining what they will be doing while on a dream vacation, they will need to access sentence structure, grammar in context, as well as target vocabulary. For example, keywords for researching geography of where they might go to. Educators will work on each of these by using text, video, and personal experience to build a schema before writing begins, and will use learner input to build tools such as anchor charts, visuals with vocabulary, personal dictionaries, etc. In contrast, if learners are being asked to write a letter to a business to complain about a defective item, the learner will need an entirely different schema. The sociolinguistic tone will be different, as will the vocabulary, grammar structures, and reasoning for the letter. Educators would similarly use text, videos, and personal experience to help learners build the schema. However, the resources will be entirely different from the first activity based on the sociolinguistic demands of the scenario. The gradual release of responsibility model is a teaching strategy to help support learners in gaining independence as writers by modeling for them what good writers do and think, and by gradually decreasing the amount of guidance, allowing them to become independent in using the writing process. Here, they are described as I do, we do, you all do, and you do, with the educator being the I and the learner being the you. According to a Guide to Effective Instruction in Writing, Kindergarten to Grade 3 from 2005, a document that was put out by the Ministry of Education, in modeled writing, the educator demonstrates a specific aspect of writing to the whole class. For example, a new writing skill, a new text form, a genre, or format. The text produced during the lesson is usually based on a situation or experience with which learners are familiar so that they can relate to the content of the writing. The educator is the scribe and provides full support by thinking aloud and modeling what a proficient writer does, thus demonstrating the process of putting thoughts and feelings into written form. By observing this process, learners learn that even proficient writers make mistakes and that all work can be revised or edited. Finished projects should be displayed at eye level to allow learners to read and reread the text. Shared writing allows learners and educators to work together on a piece of writing. The educator is the scribe, and the learners and the educator collaborate to create the text. The writing that is produced should be easily available to learners, so they may read it over and over and use it as a model for their own writing. Shared writing can be taught in large or small group settings. It's a powerful teaching tool in all areas of the curriculum. For example, it can be used to teach learners how to write a science experiment in French, a math journal entry in French, or a play in French for dramatic arts. Interactive writing is an instructional approach in which the learners and the educator share the task of scribing the message. This approach is especially helpful to reluctant writers as it guides and encourages them to become independent writers. Interactive writing can be taught to a large or small group. The finished product should be displayed so that learners can revisit it and perhaps use it as a model for their own independent writing. Guided writing is a strategy that gives learners the opportunity to review a recently taught writing skill in a small group setting and then to apply the skill through independent writing. A guided writing lesson generally follows modeled, shared, and interactive writing lessons and comes about when an educator determines that a group of learners could benefit from further educator support to develop a particular writing skill. The guided writing group comes together for the purpose of learning or practicing this writing skill. Once the educator feels that the group has a good understanding of the skill, the group is disbanded. In addition, learners may use writing frames or templates to scaffold their writing knowledge and application of writing skills. Guided writing lessons would also be appropriate in the content area subjects, such as science and technology in French, for example, to show learners how to use precise descriptive language when reporting on an experiment using written French. Independent writing gives learners opportunities to do their own writing using both self-selected and assigned topics and forms. As they write independently, learners take risks, probe meaning, develop fluency, think creatively and critically, solve problems, express personal ideas, and enjoy writing. Independent writing could occur as a follow-up to a series of writing lessons involving modeled, shared, and guided writing, with a focus on a particular concept or skill. It could also occur during a period of time when learners have free choice of the topic and form of their writing. Each piece of a learner's independent writing would not necessarily go through all of the stages of the writing process, unless the learner or educator chooses to have it to do so. However, learners should regularly take pieces of writing through the whole writing process to help them develop skills associated with each stage, and to give the educator assessment information about both the process and the product of the learner's writing. Take a moment here with the previous examples of learner scenarios and consider each carefully. Here, we have simple vocabulary labeling for A1.1 learners, interacting in a chat pod about a game for the A1 learner, interacting through an email for A2, creating a slide deck as the B1 learner, and writing an essay as a B2 learner. All clearly writing scenarios, however, they differ dramatically in the skills needed to undertake each activity. Consider the sociolinguistic vocabulary required for each of these activities. Learners will use familiar sociolinguistic terms for the chatbot and email examples as they are conversing with a friend. However, they will be using more formal language for the slide presentation and the persuasive essay. The grammar and vocabulary, the linguistic competency, and structure, pragmatic competency, will also vary for each activity. Learners will use simple terms and very little structure or grammar for the diagram and the chat pod, but will use more of a rigid structure for the email, slides, and essay, and will be using more complex grammar proficiency to communicate their message. Grammaire en Action is a document that was released by the Ministry of Education in 2019. It contains strategies and opportunities for professional reflection on current pedagogy and strategies for teaching. Research tells us that learners are more readily able to apply new grammar skills when grammar is taught in context. That is, within a project or activity where they need to apply the grammar to complete a task. Consider the example of writing a letter to a friend. Since the vacation has not yet happened, learners will be using the future tense to explain what they will be doing. Explicit teaching would be required in how to format a letter, the vocabulary for describing a vacation, the tone and language of a letter written to a friend, and how to form verbs in the future tense. With the entire class, educators will explicitly teach, discuss, and practice these components. Learners should be given the opportunity to practice orally and to be involved in the co-creation of resources to support their writing prior to putting their pencil to paper. Based on the observations of the educator throughout this process, small groups of homogeneous learners could be created and provided with just-in-time explicit instruction. The high-yield strategy of providing learners with what they need when they need it will allow them to advance their writing through mini lessons, review, oral, or written practice. If most students are becoming more independent in formatting their writing for a letter, but some are not yet demonstrating this, the educator might bring these learners together to review the specificities of a letter: salutation, body, conclusion, signature. Learners can practice as a smaller group with more teacher feedback until they are proficient enough to apply this skill independently. Similarly, if there are learners who are proficient in the format of a letter but need more support with sentence structure or vocabulary, a small group targeting this skill would be more appropriate. You may wish to pause the video to consider this question. How will you introduce, compare, and contrast formal and informal language and sociolinguistic skills in your classroom for your learners?
Goal 3. Recognizing our learners as writers. As stated in the FSL curriculum, educators encourage learners to develop their intercultural awareness by exploring diverse cultures and expanding their ability to differentiate between personal, cultural, and universal behaviors, traditions, and beliefs. In order to recognize our learners as writers in the FSL classroom, it is important to draw on our knowledge of culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy to support learner identity and create personal entry points through writing. Exploring individual and collective identity through writing in FSL. Educators planning writing tasks can encourage learners to explore their individual identities through writing prompts which focus on their lived experiences as French language learners. Learners could describe in their own words what the French language is and connect that to what language and culture mean to them by creating a portrait de langue. Here, educators accompany learners as they explore their francophone identities and their relationship to the French language by drawing on the other languages they know and speak, and how this makes them stronger writers in French. For beginner French learners, educators could have learners color in a blank silhouette, using different colors to represent the languages in their lives. For example, learners may want to mix colors to signify they are using 2 or more languages in their homes, or color the top part of the silhouette to represent the languages in which they think. They may also want to use symbols, such as a heart or hands, to represent the languages in which they feel or work. Depending on the access to technology, educators may wish to introduce technology to support learners. This would take the form of a récit numérique, as found on ideo.org. The aim of this activity is to increase the learner's sense of belonging to the French language and encourage learners to be responsible digital citizens. Here, learners are ambassadors of the francophonie and models for personal development. Examples and resources of portraits de langue and récits numériques can be found in the glossary and will be revisited in more detail later on in this module. Sociolinguistic opportunities for writing in FSL, personal and collective identity. It is important for learners to recognize the diversities and commonalities that exist within the FSL community and environment. Educators can set the context for an inclusive environment by inviting learners to collaborate on written pieces. Learners can read the récit numérique or portrait de langue of a peer and write down commonalities as well as diversities in order to develop knowledge and experience of the plurilingualism and pluriculturalism that exist within their FSL environment. Writing as social agents in the FSL environment. Here, educators can extend beyond intercultural awareness and draw on learners' intercultural competencies. By planning for activities which invite learners to explore diversity as a source of enrichment and become social agents, learners can provide descriptions of their favorite cultural or family celebrations or customs. Learners not only explore this enrichment in their own FSL learning, but explore how this contributes to the success of their peers and that of the larger sociolinguistic context. For example, la francophonie dans le monde. Educators can plan equitable writing opportunities by providing writing prompts which focus on learners' lived experiences. This will allow them to develop their sense of self and personal connections while potentially getting to know other learners' experiences and cultures. Educators can set the context for an inclusive environment by inviting learners to collaborate with them on written pieces, using shared writing as a framework. In A Guide to Effective Instruction in Writing, Kindergarten to Grade 3, 2005, the Ontario Ministry of Education describes shared writing as allowing learners and educators to work together on a piece of writing. Here, the educator is the scribe and the learners and the educator collaborate to create the text. The writing that is produced should be easily available to learners so they may read it over and over and use it as a model for their own writing. FSL educators can use shared writing by selecting an appropriate teaching point in FSL, so the French language and its diversities become a source of enrichment based on learners' own lived experience. Educators can invite learners to explore this diversity by speaking with different people or researching various cultures and ideas and incorporating this new knowledge into their writing. Learners will recognize themselves as writers based on cultural and linguistic backgrounds, and will recognize how the diverse sociocultural identities within the FSL classroom enrich the community of the learning environment. To bridge theory to practice, the CEFR encourages the creation of a common and authentic collective vocabulary while supporting learners in recognizing sociolinguistic cultural diversities. It encourages them to be active participants in their experience through co-constructed success criteria and through interaction with the educator using descriptive feedback. Notably, with more exposure to French both orally and in writing, learners will begin to draw on the metacognitive skills learned in their first language and apply this to their writing in FSL. The portrait de langue task can be adapted to any level of French learning to represent the languages which make up their learning identities. At the earliest levels, a learner might match colors, symbols, and words in French, such as cœur or jaune, to their silhouettes. As they progress, the task could evolve to full sentences and paragraphs to accompany these symbols, colors, and words. See pages 87 to 89 of the article below for examples which can be used in the FSL classroom. For the récit numérique, learners begin to reflect on how their sociocultural experiences contribute to the success of their learning in FSL. During these two tasks, educators and learners can co-construct success criteria, which allows learners to select their own writing strategies. This process again invites learners to be active in their acquisition of French written interaction and production skills in authentic situations. At this time, you may wish to pause the video for reflection. What tasks or activities could you provide, and how could you support your learners in the written expression of their personality, cultural beliefs, and understandings of identity? Some possible reflections can be found in the viewer's guide. Goal 4. Implementing technology platforms and tools. Foundations for using technology to teach writing in FSL. The writing process can be facilitated with the use of technology via tools such as spelling and grammar checks, voice to text, etc. Educators and learners have begun to rely more heavily on written communication, specifically in the virtual learning environments, otherwise known as VLE. Educators can look at this as an opportunity to integrate technology to enhance written production and interaction in FSL, as well as to inform their own assessment. Using technology to create and explore sociolinguistic opportunities for writing in FSL. Technology provides access to many different Francophone cultures and texts, many of which may not have been previously accessible. These newer resources provide educators with current and relevant materials that will expose learners to different dialects, linguistic properties, and cultures. Discussions and explorations of a myriad of resources from various parts of the world are integral in the creation of authentic sociolinguistic opportunities in FSL. IDEO is a notable platform which allows educators to select the resource based on a variety of components that complement each program of FSL. Efficient and integral use of technology to maximize writing in FSL. The Guide to Effective Written Instruction, Kindergarten to Grade 3, 2005, highlights the role of technology in the writing process for L1 learners based on the understanding that, at a very young age, many learners have already become familiar with word processing, email, video conferencing, virtual platforms, and the internet, and suggests that the use of these tools in the classroom introduces learners to a global community of learners through a variety of highly motivational activities, such as communicating with peers and educators at a distance, participating in collaborative projects that offer authentic experiences in reading and writing, and sending and receiving authentic, personally relevant, real-time messages. The French as a Second Language curriculum document highlights similar concepts in an FSL context, such as connecting learners to other schools, at home and abroad, and bringing the global community into the local classroom. The use of information and communications technology, otherwise known as ICT, offers a range of tools that can significantly extend and enrich educator instructional strategies and support FSL learners in their written interaction and production. In terms of the writing process in FSL, ICT offers learners the ability to collect, organize, and sort data they gather in order to write, edit, and present reports on their findings. Current technologies, such as online dictionaries, thesauri, encyclopedia, and other reference works may be helpful tools for learners when conducting research or editing and revising. Other technologies are also useful in creative media and can enhance multimedia presentations. Educators and learners alike may also be able to access authentic texts by French-speaking people from a variety of cultures through ICT and can choose the technologies that best suit their needs. When planning for success in FSL writing, educators may find themselves faced with an abundance of technological resources, no technological resources, or a mix of the two, often referred to as hybrid. The Common European Framework of Reference, the Universal Design Process, and Ministry FSL resources are all anchoring documents which provide pathways to support FSL educators and learners. Educators can draw from these supports to inform their planning and to select the technological tools they feel provide the best pathways to access appropriate entry points into written interaction and production. In the constantly evolving technological landscape of writing in FSL, educators may also wish to select technology which offers learners opportunities to explore how writing in the French language evolves as the technology evolves. Finally, educators may wish to focus on offering language learners opportunities to use voice and choice by selecting their own technological supports when writing. This will encourage them to be confident, engaged, and active participants in their writing. At this time, you may wish to pause the video to consider this question. How can educators take advantage of technology to provide a variety of entry points for FSL learners? Some possible reflections can be found in the viewer's guide.
Your voice and feedback support the development of future professional learning series. Please take a moment to complete the following survey with your team. Should you have any questions about this module, please send an email to omlta@omlta.org. These modules were created under the leadership of the Ontario Modern Languages Teachers Association. The OMLTA is a nonprofit professional association that has been supporting French as a second language and international languages teachers of all programs and grade levels since 1886. Today, it continues to be the leader in professional learning and advocacy, inspiring and connecting Ontario's French and international languages educators. These modules were designed to support FSL teacher retention and recruitment by deepening the understanding of the directions, principles, and content of the Ontario curriculum policy documents for all three of the province's FSL programs: Core French, Extended French, and French Immersion. The OMLTA would like to thank the Ministry of Education for its financial support in developing these modules. Special thanks is also extended to the educators who contributed their expertise and experience to the development of these modules.